It pulls you in and doesn't let go.
Okay, hello. Welcome, Scott Yenor, to the Carousel.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me on today.
Yes, Merry Christmas. Thank you so much for being here. You are the father of five, but also director of Simon Center at Heritage Foundation and Washington Fellow at Claremont Institute. You're a professor at Boise State of the Blue Field. That's all I know about that school. But you're here to talk about a great report that you did in Claremont Institute that we're calling Not Enough Good Men, Gender Integration and the Collapse of the Virginia Military Institute, in which you are breaking down a court decision called United States v. Virginia, in which Ruth Bader Ginsburg struck down the male-only admissions policy for VMI. So VMI is in it's like in eastern or western Virginia, is that right? It's like by William and Lee, Washington and Lee. It's right next to Washington and Lee? Is that right?
It's in that area. Yeah, it's definitely in Virginia.
Yes, that would make sense.
Virginia military.
Right. Okay, so let's just start from the beginning. So how long had the school been around admitting only men until some, I'm sure, activist group set up a plaintiff to make this complaint?
Yeah, the school was founded in the 1830s, I think 1838, but it's in that area, and was a single-sex, male-only school until this adverse Supreme Court decision in 1996, but the suit began in 1990 under the Bush administration, the first Bush administration. Some young lady sued for admission into the school and claimed that its admissions policies were discriminatory, which they were. It's necessary to discriminate in order to keep a male-only school. And Richard Thornburg was the attorney general, and he brought the case against Virginia. There was then a conservative governor, series of conservative governors in Virginia, and they defended VMI. From 1990 to 96, the Clinton administration picked up the suit after it took over in 1992 and pursued it with the same kind of vigor that the Bush administration did. And, there was some wins and some losses in the lower courts. And it actually bounced back and forth between district court and appeals courts, and then back to district courts and up to appeals, and then the Supreme Court, which held against VMI in 1996.
Truly one of the most insanely wrong cases of all time, I have to say. I'm a lawyer. I did my time in law school, and I studied all these cases. I haven't seen a worse decided case in a while, and I haven't thought of. I forgot that this even existed. So, why would the Bush administration pursue this?
Yeah. That's a great question. I've never really got an answer to it. I will say that it made me very depressed when I learned that the Bush administration brought the case when I started the report. I mean, my goal in doing the report is to do a kind of post-mortem on a lot of decisions that have been made in our lifetime. And so one is the Supreme Court decision. Like, there's a lot of very testable hypotheses in the Supreme Court decision here. They predicted what would happen with VMI if they integrated the sexes. And well, what happened?
That's exactly what
I
happened.
wanted
Right.
to, measure that to basically show the consequences of lefty policies on these institutions, and then argue for revisiting these decisions. And so that was my motivation. And but it was a very big surprise that the Bush administration was the one who brought it. I shouldn't say very big surprise. I mean, when you heard it, were you that shocked
No.
that they brought it? I mean, Thornburg was a liberal Republican from Pennsylvania, and they thought probably at the time that this was a necessary venue for like winning the women's vote or something.
It's so insane. So it wasn't even one of these ACLU propped up plaintiffs. This was straight up the Bush.
No, there was. I mean, I
What was
actually
the
don't know.
actual?
I don't know if the original person who applied and was denied was put up for to it by any interest group. I don't know the answer to that.
Right.
Um, and normally that would happen, but
But
I,
if that was the case, wouldn't it not be U.S. versus Virginia though? Wouldn't it then be whoever that person is versus Virginia? Like
yeah,
if
but
it's
they,
you, yeah.
what they do is they file a grievance with the United States Office of Civil Rights,
Oh,
and
I
then the
see.
Attorney
Okay.
General takes up the case. So
Got it. Okay, so that's how that happens. Okay,
yeah,
yeah, I see. Wow. Okay, so it's not even like one of these private cases. It's just like you file some sort of administrative complaint, and then they can decide whether they take your issue up or not.
yeah, and they had to
Amazing.
decide because the governor is to choose, and you get lots of complaints. 20. Recently I've looked into this. There's maybe 20,000 complaints every year on sex discrimination, and only a hundred or a little more than 100 will get taken up. So I'm
Wow.
sure it was fewer before the 91 Civil Rights Act were brought up, but nevertheless, you have to choose which ones are meritorious and which ones aren't.
Man, absolutely insane that it was the Bush admin. Goes to that's neocon. I guess it's the neocon way. So, okay. So, all right. So, RBG, in her infinite wisdom, wrote the majority opinion. It was 7-1, which is like, wow. And she said the notion that admission of women would destroy the adversative system, I don't know what that is, and with it, even the school, is a judgment hardly proved, a prediction hardly different from other self fulfilling prophecies once routinely used to deny rights or opportunities. Women's successful entry into the military academies, their participation in the nation's military forces, indicate that Virginia's fears for the future of VMI may not be solidly grounded. So, why is she at this time in this year? Did that make a lot more sense? I mean, if this was 7-1, why was that such a compelling argument for people?
Yeah, I mean, I think we should step back and
Sure.
maybe
Yeah,
describe a
absolutely.
little bit about VMI.
Totally.
So as I mentioned at the top, VMI had been around for more than a century, probably more than a century and a half at this point, and it had real distinctives. Um, One of them, obviously, male-only admissions, and then once you're admitted, the way that the cadets are trained is called the adversative method, which is basically like Marine boot camp. And so, high conflict, high demand, shaming, but ultimate like reconciliation for those who can make it through the difficult grilling that happens early on. When you arrive there, you are what they call a rat. You're part of the pack that joins the school, and there's an honor code that was written originally by the students and enforced by them. And you can imagine that sometimes involves uh, bullying, as they might say today, among the cadets. So it was, a male only school, and it had these distinctives that were thought, and I think do appeal especially to men, and most women would not like it. There was no privacy at the school. There was no locked doors. So, you were always being
And
surveilled.
and about how many men were there?
I think there would be 1,200 total at the school. But it varied over the course of time. 1,200 to 1,500 would be kind of the max out.
Got it. Okay.
And so it's a small school, and it was peopled by, that is, staffed by alumni. So they would be the ones who would be the teachers there. It wasn't lots of outsiders until really the late 70s and or early 80s, when they started hiring more of them. Usually the person who's the commandant, the person who runs it, is an alum too. So so they had all these distinctives. And the young lady who wanted to get into it made the claim that the admission of a woman would not change any of those particular um, distinctives of the school. And in fact, they could admit only women who wanted the adversative method, who could, fulfill all of the physical requirements. You could maintain privacy within like certain limits. Girls would get their own barracks, I suppose. Um, and so they made the claim that it wouldn't necessarily revolutionize the culture of the school. And uh, and really the thing turned on that question. There are other subsidiary questions that are interesting and important in the decision, but in my view, the thing turns on that question, a prediction of what would happen if females were admitted at VMI. The culture was legitimate, but was the male only admission policy necessary to sustain the culture?
Got it.
And
Okay. And adversative
Mhm.
is the word we're using for the culture, which means highly,
Challenging.
yeah, hierarchical, hazing. I mean, not obviously not that word officially, but more or less like you're a rat and then you climb up. You survive if you can
Yeah, and
survive.
there's a
Yeah,
code
yeah, yeah,
there's a code of a
yeah,
gentleman
yeah.
that governed how they would operate, and you'd have to be able to recite whenever an upperclassman asked you to do it. So there was it was like a real culture. It's like a sports team or something like that, except bigger, with more public spirited motivations behind it and goals behind it. And so when Ruth Bader Ginsburg, makes the decision, she basically says, and once again, like, there are other parts of it, and people can criticize me for focusing only on this, but to me, this is the central point of the whole decision that she makes, is that it will not, admission of women will not fundamentally transform the culture of VMI. And they'll be able to keep the same physical standards, the same adversative method, the same code of a gentleman, the same privacy, the same grooming standards, the same rat lines. Um, and
I mean, the physical thing, how could she think that about the physical part? Is the idea basically that there's now going to be two tracks and the female track is not going to influence the male track? Is that kind of the thinking?
Yeah, I mean, uh, I don't know how sincere people are when they say things.
Yeah.
Um, she may only have meant that very few women will be admitted into the school. And so initially, and we can get into this as we go forward, but initially that's how the leadership of the school interpreted it. We're only going to admit the
It's
women
going to
who
be two.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and they're going to do.
care.
They can do pull-ups. They're the ones
Yeah.
who can do pull-ups. The two
Yeah.
women who can do pull-ups. Yeah.
Yeah, and run the
Right.
mile in a certain amount of
Yeah.
time,
Right.
and will cut their hair short. Will love the adversative method where you get into their face and you scream and
Right.
yell. And so maybe it'll only be a couple. And that's, as I say, initially how the leadership of the school interpreted the decision. And it's reasonable to interpret the decision like that. But it's unreasonable to think that if only a couple women are admitted, it's not going to be considered a discriminatory admission policy. And they're going to be sued and preemptively probably change the admission standards with different leadership to get greater gender, equity at the school. And of course, that's what happened within 5 years. Initially, there were very few women admitted because the original standards were maintained, but then dual standards for men and women in physical strength and speed and all that stuff started to be adopted. Different standards for hair length and uniforms, and the cat was out of the bag.
So this is like I'm thinking of Nancy Mace, of course, immediately, who was a similar thing happening, right, at the Citadel. What is the difference between VMI, and the Citadel? Aren't they both Navy?
No, they're not both Navy, but they are both publicly supported military academies that were single sex until the late 90s.
Okay, so they're basically the same thing.
The reason Clarence Thomas did not sit on this case was that his son was attending the Citadel.
Wow.
And
so we would have gotten one out of him too.
Yeah, it would have been 7.
So he was out. It would have been 7-2. Yeah, because the one dissenter, of course, was Scalia in this age, right?
Yeah.
Wow. So Citadel and VMI are basically undergoing the exact same thing. And Nancy Mace is the first female at Citadel. And so there's obviously a first female at VMI. And we're thinking that this first female actually is probably like physically pretty able to hang out, right? But what you're saying right now is that, okay, maybe those first two didn't change the culture, but at that point it became a center for lawfare of discrimination and stuff, and that just further and further pushed it into mediocrity.
Yeah, I think that's probably the trajectory that it happens. It doesn't necessarily mean that there is lawfare. It means that the admissions people are looking at potential problems. So preemptively, they will make changes to the code, to the grooming standards, to the physical standards, to the adversative method in order to preempt, in order to get the number up.
Sorry, no, go ahead.
That's the logic of civil rights. The logic of civil rights is we don't know exactly what the end game is, but we're going to say that it's equity or parity between men and women at the school. And when there isn't parity, well, there must be discrimination. And now we have to break down these barriers of discrimination. Now, there is discrimination, and the school cannot be maintained without it. So once you end one type of discrimination, now you're moving into making this egalitarian or androgynous culture that is equally welcoming to men and women, because otherwise it would be discriminatory. So the logic of civil rights points to the erasing of the old practices and the embracing of new practices.
Yeah, obviously. So, so we're kind of jumping ahead. We could probably spend a lot more time understanding the decision, understanding strict scrutiny. So yeah, maybe let's talk about that first. So the grounding of the decision, if I understand it, was some sort of essentially RBG was saying that they had not met their burden of arguing and proving that it would destroy the culture of VMI. So is that a strict or middle scrutiny question? Where does that standard come in?
Yeah. So for those, I'm not a lawyer myself. I do a little common law when I teach it.
I haven't practiced law ever, so don't worry.
All right. Good. So strict scrutiny is when government either abridges some sort of fundamental right or it classifies people based on a forbidden classification. So the recent cases that made affirmative action or racial quotas in higher education unconstitutional, the SFA versus Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard case, treated affirmative action policies under strict scrutiny. You're classifying people on the basis of race. That means you have to have a pretty darn good reason to do it. And strict scrutiny is almost always deadly for the law that is submitted to strict scrutiny.
Right.
Opposite side of that is the rational basis test, which
Okay.
is basically, no fundamental right is abridged, no suspect classification is attempted. So, it basically stands or falls on its own merit. Where is sex? Sex has traditionally been between those two. So they call it intermediate scrutiny. And
So just to make sure everybody understands, what you're saying is when a institution discriminates on the basis of sex, if it's going to get that policy not declared, is it against the Civil Rights Act? Is that where, is it against
or
the Constitution?
unconstitutional.
Yeah, whatever.
Constitutional case, yeah.
If it's going to pass constitutional muster in terms of the courts, it has to meet a standard of varying degrees of scrutiny, which basically means it has to have a better and better compelling reason, basically, right?
So think of it like this. So we have men and women's bathrooms. That's a discriminatory policy. And but there's a good reason for it. We want to protect female modesty. And so we keep them in separate bathrooms.
I see. Yeah.
So it's pretty easy to satisfy that. But, I shouldn't say it. Compared to strict scrutiny, it's pretty easy to satisfy that criteria. And the thing about the decision is that my contention is, unlike Justice Scalia, I think that Bader Ginsburg does not leave strict intermediate scrutiny. She stays at that level, keeps sex there. But
because Scalia is saying she actually goes to strict scrutiny.
She goes to strict scrutiny, which makes it impossible to have any kind of single-sex school.
Right.
But I think you can see that she keeps it at intermediate scrutiny, but she basically says there's nothing you could ever say or do to prove that this policy is necessary. So it looks like strict scrutiny in fact. And because she has this kind of stereotype trump card, how dare you think that women would not be able to suffer through the adversative method, meet the same physical standards? And because you're not open to that possibility, the entire admissions policy is based on a stereotype that women are docile and weaker and slower. And but that hasn't been proven. So Scalia is kind of right in that if you have that stereotype trump card and you can play that stereotype trump card whenever you want, it ends up acting like strict scrutiny. Ultimately, most of the justices and judges in the court system are willing to at least pretend and keep it at the intermediate level, so it's possible to still have male only and female only schools that are public schools, but they have to be
I see. So that's how this survives it being a global policy. I get it. So just to explain this. So what you're saying is, okay, in the common law, we live in a common law country, meaning that the decision of a Supreme Court is binding as legislation. It is law. So my question at the beginning of this, which you clarified just right now, was how is it possible if this case invalidated the gender discrimination policy of VMI? Why did that then not invalidate the gender discriminatory policy of every single school in the country, right?
Yeah.
And you're saying that under medium scrutiny, intermediate scrutiny, only this particular program was found to be particularly discriminatory because it didn't. So I'm losing it. It didn't. What did it not do?
Can I?
Yes, please.
It was based on this outmoded idea that women couldn't do the things that men could do.
Right.
And women wouldn't
Right.
want to do the things, the adversative method, that men would want to do. Look, I mean, let's look at this in a different way. Now, why did VMI exist? VMI existed because it was thought that it was a special provenance of men to practice martial valor, and that the school was a keen way of cultivating manly honor among citizens. And when Virginia, so like my point there is that the goals of the school were sex coded, like they were dependent on the male sex. And Virginia was not allowed to argue that when they were in front of the Supreme Court. They had to only be able to say that they were pursuing gender neutral goals in their education. So Virginia created a Virginia Women's Military Institute. I can't remember the exact acronym for that, but they created one of those.
Oh yeah, you see that in there. It's
And,
VWMI
yeah,
or something. Oh
yeah.
my god. Or
And,
VWIL program.
yeah, it was at Macon Randolph College, I think, maybe.
Wow.
But regardless, it was housed at a different school, and then Virginia defended itself by saying that VMI cultivated education diversity within the Virginia system. Like they could never say the school was about manly honor or martial valor as male coded goals. They had to say education diversity or excellence is what the school was about. So, so they had to deny the reality of what the school was about because of the civil rights goals of only allowing gender neutral objectives in government laws.
Wow.
So now when there's intermediate scrutiny, which as I say, survives this case, you can still have single sex classrooms or schools.
Right.
You have to argue that the single sex classroom or school promotes a gender neutral goal, like higher test scores
It's
or
unbelievable.
better graduation rates.
So, but how do they? But in reality, as Scalia said, in reality, no school would survive this, right? In reality, it is strict scrutiny, right? Because could any possible school? So I'm right with Scalia right now. Could any possible school ever survive that? Well, how could they prove that?
Yeah,
Right?
well, because there's science. So, no, schools do survive it. It just takes a long time, a lot of litigation.
But how? What could they possibly
Because they say we have shown through lots of studies and practices that male-only schools lead to a 10% increase in
higher test
graduation
scores?
rate.
Oh, because they're not right. Because they're not having sex with each other, basically. Right.
Or
they're not distracted. They're not
usually
distracted.
usually
Okay,
what
I get it.
happens
I get
is
it.
that
I get it.
female-only schools will have higher science scores for girls who are in female-only schools
I see.
because the men are oppressing them or whatever during
Yes.
during the classroom. So, and they can
Yeah.
feel more comfortable in being wrong and all that stuff. So if girls can do it, well, there might be this similar kind of evidence that the guys can do it. So, I mean, there's not a ton of single sex schools in the country, but there are, I think, about 400 schools that either are segregated on the basis of sex or have classrooms that are segregated on the basis of sex that are also public schools. And so you can survive. But you can't say that the goal of my school is to create better
male. Yes.
To create better.
Amazing. I totally get it. I totally get it. This is it's such a balancing act. So where does this a principle that seems to be man, you really gotta admire the left. You gotta admire the left for stuff like this because they tee it up so perfectly. It's like they set the traps so perfectly so that you can't get out. So this thing where you can't have any policy that is gendered, where is that? Is that in the Civil Rights Act or that's in the common law? Where is that? The thing that was preventing VMI from simply saying we're trying to make better men. Where is that? Is that in the law or is that in the act? Where is that?
not explicitly in the law. It's not explicitly in the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, but it is in a series of Supreme Court decisions interpreting those things.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a common law doctrine.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Unbelievable. It's so insane. Okay, so now I think we're ready for you to take us down the cascade of what actually happened. So, okay, this is what year again? The decision is
1996.
So this is 96. Do you remember one of my favorite quotes ever is one of the Sandra Day O'Connor saying that we're going to approve affirmative action now, but in 25 years, we surely won't need this policy anymore because all the racial differences will be long gone in 25 years. She's on the record saying that in approving affirmative action. In 25 years, they're like 10 times worse than they were then. So this is kind of one of those circumstances. We're in the 90s, late 90s, and then like within 20 years, the whole thing is just toast, right? So what happens? How does the cascade of failure begin?
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, the first president who had to implement the decision, name was Josiah Bunting. He was a old, like Bush hand. He was in charge of the school, and good guy. And he's like, it would be an insult to women if we held them to different standards than men. So he tried to maintain the same physical standards, the same grooming standards, the code of the gentleman, and all that stuff. And within 5 years, he was out, and a new president was hired, and they began, making all the changes to the physical tests. So as I talk about in the report, and I just need to look at the report for a second here, male cadets had to perform a minimum of 5 pull-ups, while 1 was sufficient for a female. Male cadets had to run 11 to had 1.5 miles in 12 minutes and 30 seconds. Females got an additional 2 minutes. 2001, females were allowed to get rid of buzz cuts and start wearing more feminine hairstyles. And
what the hell, man?
Within, I think, 7 years, women were allowed to grow hair down to their shoulder blades. And so like all of the loosening of the policies happened, but still, like I would say that the school was recognizable. Excuse me, there were different standards in all these ways, but the school was pretty recognizable until the mid 2000 teens. You'd expect a revolution like this to take some time, and it did take some time. But basically, VMI went woke in 2015, 18, and certainly post George Floyd, and tons of policies were changed. So the Me Too movement rolled over this school, and there was a Title IX office created with a hotline where you could report violations of the new code of the cadet, not code of the gentleman, which adopted much more inclusive language than the code of a gentleman, certainly not sex specific like a code of a gentleman. And now the honor code would be overseen by the administration and not by the students. And that is a fundamental, I would say, sea change in the nature of the school. Once the cadets lose the ability to really be the enforcers of the morality on campus and the honor code, and it goes to the bureaucrats. But like that's an inevitable byproduct of the desire to extinguish discrimination on campus, because discrimination happens in the normal day-to-day interactions that people have. So we need an HR kind of mentality in order to come down and to limit the discrimination in, the daily life of students. So it was Me Too, in the 2015-16 area. And that created, the need to have this new code. They got rid of the code of the gentleman and adopted the code of the cadet. I mean, the language is very striking. I don't know if it's something. Should we read some of this?
Yeah, read it, please.
So this was the old code. Think about this: that I'm 55. You were alive in 1996, right?
Oh yeah, I was 11.
A school was existing with public funds whose honor code, was this during your lifetime. Without a strict observance of the fundamental code of honor, no man, no matter how polished, can be considered a gentleman. The honor of a gentleman demands the inviolability of his word, the incorruptibility of his principles. He is the descendant of the knight, the crusader. He is the defender of the defenseless and the champion of justice, or he is not a gentleman. And then it just goes on like a gentleman does not speak casually about his girlfriend. He does not lose his temper, exhibit anger, fear, embarrassment.
That's a
He does
good
not
one, man.
hail a lady from a club window.
Yeah.
Now,
that is a great. He does not hail a lady from a club window.
I mean,
what is a club window? What's a club? Is that a bar? Is that a restaurant? What's
I
a
think
club?
probably from the clubs on campus.
Yes. He does not hail a lady from a club window. Very true. We call that cat calling.
Right. This is the one written in 2023 by the administration. Like ladies next to one another. Okay.
Okay. Then this is called the Code of the Cadet.
Cadet. A VMI cadet is a well-mannered, respectful, and properly presented individual who holds themselves
Oh my God.
and others accountable for their actions and words as a valued member of the Corps. VMI standards are high for a meaningful purpose to produce leaders of character. A cadet wears the VMI uniform with pride, always remembering and demonstrating what it means to be a VMI cadet.
Man.
No knights, no crusaders, no word is your bond. It's
no
just
club windows, man.
No
No cat calling from the club windows.
Like the club window stuff is replaced with this.
Yeah, it's and just hollow HR speak, pretty much. You know, like I'm reading. Yeah, Code of a Cadet is a leader of character who offers equal respect, treatment, and understanding to all. Like, there's nothing of substance here besides don't be racist, right? Or like don't, all it is the, it's the cancer expressing itself, right? Like you can never, you have to exist per the rules of the thing that destroyed the thing, it's unbelievable. I mean, this other one is so. I like in the original one, does not display his wealth, money, or possessions. Does not slap strangers on the back, nor so much lay a finger on a lady. Does not lick the boots of those above, nor kick the face of those below him on the social ladder. Dude, amazing. While
we were alive, that existed as an honor code at a school. Like,
it's amazing.
Awesome.
Well, it is awesome, but it's also like this. Even you can also understand. I mean, everybody should look at these two codes side by side if you want to like understand what happened to our institutions. But the older code is also kind of silly in its own way, right? I mean, the old code is also like outdated. Seeming, the club window, right? I mean, it's also kind of funny in its own way. It's sort of idiosyncratic, the older code. But then it's replaced with just total nothing, right? Like complete nothing of substance at all. It's just like don't be evil, basically. Yeah,
it would be
like the Google policy.
It would be like the idea that you should lick the boots of HR.
Yes, you shall lick no boots besides the boots of HR, and in which case you should lick heavily. Yeah, that's basically what it's saying. Unbelievable. Man, everybody needs to see these two things next to each other. They really do, because this is just is so crazy. And you know what's the biggest sin of this whole thing is not even this change, right? The biggest sin is that this was force changed by someone who's saying that this exact change would not occur.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And that's the biggest lie in this whole thing. That she was saying it wasn't going to happen, and then it happened. So she was wrong, right?
And that's like, so a motivation for writing this is to show that the factual basis
was totally
for her assertion has been disproven by experience.
Yeah.
And therefore, like, the case should be revisited because
Absolutely.
it's based on this projection or prophecy about what would happen if they integrated the school. That prophecy ended up like global warming policies, like New York's going to be underwater by
Yeah.
2023.
Wrong.
No, wrong. Maybe
Yeah.
the science behind it isn't right.
Yeah. Affirmative action is not going to be needed according to Sandra Day
Yeah.
O'Connor in 25 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wrong. Sorry.
So
So yeah, it's true. Like these people were just completely wrong. But of course, everybody in the regime left or liberals, whatever, they don't believe in accountability for their. They don't. What's the rule with them? They don't.
no,
There's never any consequences for their decisions. They don't. They don't actually face the consequences
well,
for
I
what
think
they
that
say.
this is an actual instance where people should take some heart that you could establish a military school now and it could survive scrutiny because this decision is disproven. And some states are going to do this, I believe. And this report is designed to really help them build the legal case for overturning U.S. versus Virginia. I don't expect Virginia to try to revive the single-sex nature of VMI, but I think other states could build a new VMI. And
Which state would do that? Texas? Where are we going to get a VMI? California? Definitely not.
West
No.
Virginia will do it.
Okay. Yeah, West Virginia, Alabama, maybe Georgia. No, Georgia's now they've taken over Georgia pretty much. Florida. We need Florida. This is perfect to do in Florida. DeSantis would know exactly what to do with this. I feel like
Yeah,
this is like right up his alley.
a great commandant.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that I think that that's part of the motivation behind doing a postmortem is to just make the legal case. There needs to be a legal strategy and all of that, but to make the case that the decision was wrongly decided.
It's so crazy, man. So, are you a Robert Conquest guy? Do you know about the Robert Conquest laws?
Yep.
This is a great example of that, right? Because it's the final stage is a best way to understand the behavior of any institution is to assume that it's run by a cabal of its enemies. That's basically this, right? It's like the people who were interested in destroying the place were more interested in it than the people that were interested in maintaining it, and they basically took control of it.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
destroyed it.
it's remarkable how long VMI lasted as a pretty conservative institution.
Yeah.
And so conquest law on that score doesn't really apply to the first 150 years of its history.
Right.
And there were slow adaptions happening, including, as I mentioned before, the hiring of people who are from outside the VMI family, and all of that are kind of thrust upon the place by accreditation rules and other things. But yeah, it folded pretty, like within a generation of students or half a generation of students between 96 and 2016. That's 20 years. That maybe we'll call it a generation in the old style. It was
one generation gone.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what's it like now? So like if you were to walk around VMI now versus VMI in 1992, what would be the difference? I don't know if you've done that or know anybody who. Yeah, no, I don't expect you to do that. I'm just saying, like, is there anybody on the ground? Like, is it just, are they like waving rainbow flags and like doing theater productions now? Like, what's actually happening?
My guess is that the conservative position at VMI now is we need to get rid of the excesses of the woke regime, but no one wants to go back to the way things were. And so you can see it in some of the like student newspapers and things that are quoted in the report, where students are like, well, they want more student involvement in enforcing the rules. They want to go back to the Republican non-managerial way of handling things. But of course you can't do that when the goal is to stamp out discrimination. And so what they really need to do is go back to the pre-1996 version of it, but they, never draw that conclusion, or if they do draw that conclusion, they're not foolish enough to say that because they know that that's a non-starter given the current administration, the current board, the current governors, the current political environment in the state. So the conservatives there, insofar as they're conservative, are fighting on the enemy's territory and asking for like the last thing that they did to be repealed. And so there's a certain kind of pitifulness to that because the argument is not really up to the goal that they have. And my hope is that something like the VMI report can point that out to people to realize that the half measures are not going to work.
Well, but okay, wait. So hold on, I have two different questions. The clarifying point I want to make is, but I mean, like, actually on the campus, is the performance way down? Is everybody fat now? Is it, are they completely not?
Yeah.
If I was to show up at VMI, would it be very noticeable that it's been a decline in the quality of the candidate of the cadets?
Yeah, I mean, once again, the student newspapers write about this, and they say that there is obesity among the VMI cadets. Wow. 1 year, it is said that only females were leading every kind of troop that exists within the school, which is kind of a statistical impossibility that they're the best ones. And
that's a good fact. The weight is a good fact.
Yeah,
because I think that what you need to show is not only did it completely change the culture, but that the culture got much worse, right? That these people are much less prepared for war. And you could do it blindly. Like, you could say, well, it used to be that 100% of our students could run the mile in 6 minutes, and now only 50% can run the mile in 6 minutes, because you can't fight that objective fact, right?
We were really trying to get public records requests successfully answered by VMI during it, because we were trying to get at that. The getting at it, we were asking the question, how many VMI graduates go on to the military? Which used to be kind of the normal course of things at the school. And the suspicion that our people on the ground that we were talking to had was that the number was a lot lower, in the 70s or 60s, and that the females didn't go on very often. And even though obviously the United States military itself admits women and has many of the same issues that VMI had. But like for the longest time, VMI graduates were actually of higher quality than West Point graduates. And no one would say that now, even though West Point underwent the same kind of rigorous sexual integration.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would say that's another great fact. If you can say, oh, back in the day, it was 99% military conscription of graduates, and then now it's way down. Like, those objective numbers are obviously there, and those are probably going to be important for whoever litigates, as you're saying, whoever litigates this, to say, like, not only did it change the culture, it changed the culture for all the touch points that this place stood for went way down. And, so obviously the proof is in the pudding. I mean, it's unbelievable to me that people at the time could not see this, though. That's what's just so insane to me.
That's the thing. VMI won at the lower court level because nearly every court accepted the idea that admitting women into VMI would fundamentally change, degrade the culture and standards of the play. Almost every lower court did, but RBG had the trump card, the stereotype. You're just saying that because that's the way it's always been, but it doesn't need to be like that for today's women. So, we expect that the new woman will adhere to these standards. And like that is the thing. Every court held in favor of VMI on this question, and until the Supreme Court.
But why is that such a trump card? I mean, just because she's saying stereotype? I mean, like, just because she's saying this is like an idea that you all have of women and that's
Yeah,
wrong?
so all of the science that the experts brought into the courts to prove that you'd have to fundamentally change the standards of the place in order to accommodate sexual integration can be ruled out. All the science in the world will not refute the idea that your science is sexist. And that is the trump card that RBG played. Now, I don't know that everyone who joined her majority opinion endorsed that view. And ultimately, as I mentioned before, some single-sex schools actually survive the intermediate scrutiny. So it's obvious that more people were open to science not being simply sexist. But that's kind of where her opinion has many points where she kind of leans into that view.
That's so strange, though, because it's like, what does that even mean? The stereotype? I guess it's like, maybe it's a language thing that, like, the language back then, yeah, it kind of made men and women seem like, oh, the gentlemanly dignity of the man versus the feminine agreeableness of the woman, right? Like, is it just because, right? If RBG is saying 100 years later that these words are outdated, then you can see why people would be like, okay, yeah, maybe it is a stereotype. But what I can't understand is, I'm literally just trying to put my mind in myself in the shoes of the people at this time. What I can't understand is how they could ever believe that physically there was no data to suggest that women had suddenly magically met male equivalency in the physical challenges. So how could she get around that? I don't understand how these people could think that that wouldn't completely change the physical prowess of the populations.
Yeah, I mean, you have some common sense on your side. Well, they answer with their own common sense. There are books that are written on this topic from a feminist perspective, and their basic view is that the reason women are slower and weaker than men is that they've been consigned to minor league women's sports. So if women started playing with the boys, and that's the name of one of the books, Playing with the Boys. If they started playing with the boys, they would rise to the occasion, and their physical strength would be better. So the fact that they are kept in second rate,
Yes,
WNBA,
I see.
if they would be in the NBA, you wouldn't believe how great yeah. And so, I mean,
crazy.
This is the problem. Like, the stereotype argument is ultimately
I get it.
I
get it, right? Yeah, right. Because you can always play that card. You can always be like, well, it's just communism's never been tried, right? True female equality has never been tried. But if it was, and if you gave us 2,000 years, give us 2,000 years, and then then we'll see if we can evolve women into men.
The quotation you began with from the decision, I just want to go back and read that.
Yeah. Sure.
I think this is the key sentence. The notion that admission of women would downgrade VMI's stature, destroy the adversative system, and with it even the school, is a judgment hardly proved. Of course, it can't be proved because it's a prediction about the future. And it's based on, enduring characteristics of men and women projecting into the future.
Yeah, and she says a prediction hardly different from other self-fulfilling prophecies once routinely used to deny rights.
Yes, exactly. So
it's so crazy. But as you've said, now we do have the proof, right? I mean, now you have the proof, right?
We have the proof, but bummer, it's kind of late. The school's been destroyed.
Yeah. Right. But now we need new ones, as you're saying. We need Florida Military Institute. All right. So in the last 5 minutes here, tell us what else you're working on. And maybe also I just have a pure curiosity question. What's going to happen with the Civil Rights Act? Are we going to ever get to a point where the right has the cojones to go against it? Because it so clearly needs to be. I mean, in my opinion, like I realize this is like third rail, but it's come on, right? We got to go after it eventually.
Well, I think that reassessment is taking place among many on the right. I think of like Chris Caldwell's book, The Age of Entitlement.
Love it. I love it.
It's opened a lot of eyes to this. And then there's been several books written after that. And there were actually a couple before that. My favorite book in the genre, even better than Chris's book, is called After Equality by Herman Belz. Written in the mid-80s.
I got to write this down.
Really good. Herman Belz, Belz. And I think it's After Equality. It might be Against Equality. I'm just
Equality Transformed.
No, that's a different one. But, anyways, I mean, it's a very serious takedown of the civil rights mentality that is unleashed from the '64 Act. There's other books. Richard Hanania wrote one. A guy named Thomas Powers wrote one, and so it's happening. Like there's energy and interest in discovering what the costs, constitutional, economic, and moral, are of the Civil Rights Act. I wrote my article on this, and if you're interested in it, my contribution, almost everyone talks about race. Mine is on sex discrimination. It's an article called Compulsory Feminism, written in First Things last year.
Compulsory feminism. Yeah, I'm actually on your page, man. I'm actually far more personally. Oh yeah, I see it here. I think that the truest manifestation of the mistake of the civil rights is far more rooted in sex than in race. Personally. I mean, I realize everybody has different opinions on that, but to me, there's a starker difference. I think the male and the female. Once you start messing with that, you can mess with anything. I think as we've seen with all the trans stuff, it's so fundamentally bad. And what we're talking about is eroding borders between things. We're eroding the walls. We're eroding the lines so that everything's fuzzy, and that's just pure destruction. In my view. And I think the strongest barrier is between man and woman, personally.
Yeah. I mean, the various ways in which the various things that the anti-sex discrimination regime makes impossible might be really important for supporting families.
Right.
So, and if you accept that logic, then it's difficult. I should say, like the approach of the sex discrimination regime that we have puts a real damper on what can be accomplished in family policy. That's the kind of logic that I try to put forward in the compulsory feminism article.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I got to read that. I'll put that in the show notes. So what's next for you? What do you have coming up? And then we'll let you go.
Well, I write a lot of things on a lot of things. I spent a lot of time writing on higher education reform, and I'm doing a lot of writing on that right now. Some other large pieces, one on gay rights that'll be coming out in First Things. I think the next issue. It's in the can, as we say, and so I basically spend most of my time writing on feminism, sexual revolution, and higher education. And I'm also going to write something on Cicero. I've been on a reading binge on Cicero. So, look out for that too, I suppose. Cicero probably wouldn't make as good of a topic for a podcast.
Well, is there some tie-in though? Is Cicero like based on the WQ or something? Like, what's Cicero say about gender?
My head is no. Totally there is my theory on Cicero is that he was a populist, and so I've been going through his populism.
I see. Okay, very cool. All right, man. Well, dude, you're awesome. Really happy to have done this. Happy to have made your acquaintance. I could not. I appreciate your work more. I think it's really great what you've done here, and the fact that you've compared the cadet code versus the original code. Everybody needs to we need a meme of just these two things right next to each other. Get somebody at Claremont to make this for you. They should have a department for this. But thank you so much, and yeah, stay in touch. It was great to have you.
Oh, thanks for inviting me on. I appreciate it.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
See you later.
Thank you.